This lesson will show you how to complete the drawing file and dimensioning for the guide bracket. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like first. And this is our guide bracket here. Now we're going to be using a C-size sheet to complete this exercise. And I'm going to try to keep some of the dimensioning where it is. Some of it's going to have to be changed because it doesn't follow the rules of dimensioning. So for example, dimensions shouldn't be sitting on top of the part in orthographic projection. This is an isometric view of this part. So we are going to be improving on it as you've seen me do in the past. So I'm not going to be crossing over extension lines. And I'm going to be setting an appropriate distance from the drawing view when I run these dimensions as well. So, as always, I like to show what this looks like first before I get started, discuss kind of my plan of action, and then I'm going to be switching this to my iPad while I complete the work so I don't have to constantly go between two screens, right? So, we're going to be going into the guide bracket model, and I've also just want to say that I also reminded you not to complete fillets for this, right? I don't care about adding the fillets to this model, and it actually makes the dimensioning a little harder because there's so many fillets on this that a lot of lines actually disappear when we create the drawing file. So remember, if you've run the fillets or you've run some of the fillets, you can just basically remove them because I don't have any for mine, as you can see. So we're going to go File, New, Standard Inch IPT ANSI Inch IDW as always. And I'm going to change the D size sheet to a C size sheet. We're going to hit OK. And this is going to give us a lot of views that we really don't need and aren't useful. This right side view is useful, but it's considering this to be a front view, right? And so we're going to be changing this. So I'm going to click on this view and I'm going to switch it to be the left, which is really the front view. This is the view that I'm interested in. And that will force all these other views to get in line with the parent view, right? The parent view, the bottom left view, the front view is the one that controls the other views, right? As you know, I can move the top view up and down, but not left to right. I can move the right side view left to right, but not up and down. But the front view, I can control them all. And then this view here, we're going to switch this. We're going to double click, switch this corner. This is the better isometric view, shows more information. And we're going to scale this down to 3/4. Hit OK. And we're going to sneak that up into the corner. Well, we're not sneaking it up there, but you catch my drift. All right, so the first thing we need to do, as discussed before, is we're going to be creating centerline annotations. So on a drawing, anything that is circular, a circle, anything that represents symmetry requires a center line. So we're going to switch to annotate, pick center mark, and create a center mark for that circle there. Now, here is a bit difficult because this object line is where this object line ends. This is directly in line with the center line. So it basically, this object line is more dominant and supersedes that center line. But what we can do is still add a bisector center line. We can select this hidden line and this one, and it will add the center line in, because center lines always extend beyond the feature they're attached to. So it makes sense that the center line would stick out above and below the hole. It doesn't really matter that we can't see the center line behind this object line. And also, we also need to show one here. So we'll do another bisector center line. We'll select this vertical hidden line and this vertical hidden line, and we'll create it. So that's everything we need to do for annotations. So at this point, we should be able to begin dimensioning this part. So some of the dimensions I like. The dimensions on the isometric view that show the position of the hole in this top extrusion look good to me. So I'm going to run those dimensions first. It makes the most sense to run those dimensions on the top view where we can actually see the circle in clear view. Remember, we're not crowding the part. We're leaving ourselves some room here, right? So we're not going to have it super close. I'm using Inventor's hint system where the dimension turns dotted to kind of give me a hint on where I should drop the dimension. Also a reminder that extension lines, dimension extension lines, leave an automatic gap here, right? So when you add the center line, you click this line and the edge of the center line, it will create the gap for you. Extension lines should not be running through the holes, right? This is something I haven't really seen the class do, but just a few people have done things like that. So I just want to clear that up. So moving on from here to this horizontal line to the center line, right? We're leaving these 1-inch dimensions pretty even, right? That we want to keep our spacing consistent, right? This is very important. And these holes, this hole here, right? We can also dimension this like this. We could run the dimension here, right? Sticking into this corner here, or we could even run it on this side, right? It doesn't really matter, right? As long as we're not crowding it. So if I put it on this side, I can kind of keep it in line with that dimension arrow, and I don't have to worry about crowding anything and not crossing over extension lines. So I'll leave that one there for now. The 0.44 hole. And just as a reminder, right, when we're running these dimensions, we're trying to select the view that is best suited to show the dimensions with clarity. So obviously the top view is the only view that we can show these dimensions 1 inch and 1 inch, and that's because we only can dimension to object lines. We can't dimension to hidden detail lines or center lines that are associated with hidden detail lines. That would be incorrect, right? That goes back to the basic dimensioning rules sheet that's in the hub. So I may not be referring to that sheet as I do this to show it to you, but I'm verbally referencing a lot of the points that are listed there. So moving on, I'm going to work on this dovetail slot next. Right? I'm going to clean up what I see on the isometric sheet. I can't have dimensions sitting on top of this. What I do need to know is, again, from the edge here to where this dovetail begins. So I can select this line here, pull it up, and this is going to be 0.45. So what I can do is I can flip this to this side. It doesn't want to fit in the middle, but again, I'm trying to keep the spacing that I pick similar, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. Like, this dimension shouldn't be sitting all the way down here if I have these two spaced this far away, right? We have to, for professionalism, we have to make sure that this is being done pretty much the same everywhere, right? We like to leave ourselves a little room off the first dimension, right? We don't need to pull this all the way up here to clear this feature. That would look funny. We only need to come off enough off this detail right here. So next we have the 0.5. That can chain right up to the 0.45. And again, that doesn't fit inside, so we have to leave it to the outside like this. We also need to show the depth, which is from here to here. Right? And again, we're trying to maintain a proper distance. And again, we can right click, left click OK, and we can actually drag this dimension to here just so it doesn't crowd up with the 0.45. So we know the position of the dovetail, its depth here, and what we also need to know is the angle of it. So we can run a dimension from here to here. Actually, I'm going to undo that because that didn't work out. I'm going to try this. And this here, this angular dimension, it's a bit crowded here, right? There's no good opportunity to pull it off the part. So what we could do is what's called a detail view. So if we go to place views and we select detail, we come in here and we can just pick, right, select in this area, this dovetail, then left click. We're going to create detail A. And then what we're going to do is pull it off, maybe somewhere down here. And there is our detail A. So this takes this section, copies it, and scales it up twice the scale. And what we can do here is go to Annotate tab, grab Dimension, and then click from here to here, and we can dimension that 60 degrees comfortably. Right? So that's something new that you haven't seen. And that's something that we can take advantage of, definitely, right? There's all these fancy things in Inventor that can make our life easier, and that's one of them. So, perfect. Okay, so that takes care of identifying that angle. We are also going to take a look at the thickness of some of these extrusions as well. And I think we'll look at that in a bit. I think we'll work on the bottom piece right here, right? And a lot of the dimensions you see on the sheet, to me, they are acceptable to be placed on this view because this is the best place to dimension all those because this is a profile, right? This gives you a clear view profile of the bottom of the guide bracket. This is the best place to put these dimensions right here, in my opinion. Right, and some of these ones as well. So we're going to click over and we're going to run a dimension from here to here, trying to keep our spacing, the same, right? And I kind of zoom out to do that every now and again to make sure I'm doing things correctly. And we'll also run this dimension here. Right, remember these dimensions can be closer, right? The first dimension should always be furthest, and then the second, third, and fourth dimension don't need to be the same. Those dimensions should be a little closer. The reason we leave more space at the beginning is because we don't want to crowd the view, right? So that's the line of thinking here. And so we've got the 1.5. We also need to show the 2.5 here, which looks fine. And we also are going to be showing that from here to here is 0.5. Hit OK. We also need to, bring this to the outside, right? We can't have this 0.5 sitting in this dimension line here. All right, so this is looking good. What are we missing? We're missing the 0.75, correct? So what we could do is actually we could run a dimension from here to here and dimension it as a 0.25, right? This is just going to clean this up a bit. And then this is cutting into this extension line. And then we'll just we'll just manipulate this 0.25, keeping it in line with the 1.0, and that looks good. And it would also be the same on this side as well, right? So what we could do is add a typical to this, right? Typical will mean it basically almost tells the story here that it's going to be the same, right? Of course, it also cuts through that extension line, but again, you know, what we could do is actually just create a center line here, right? So we could eliminate that. We could go to annotate, we could go to center line, find the middle here, and then what we can do is double click this and then get rid of the typical. We don't need to worry about putting the typical on the 0.25 or the 0.5, right? Because the center line will tell the story of symmetry, right? That this is symmetrical on this side, so I don't need to add these dimensions to this side or add the typicals, right? So that's the meaning of the center line, right? Center lines go where there is symmetry, right? When we want to do some dimensioning for sure. So that should be everything that I need here. We're going to take a look at the right side still, and we're going to be looking at adding some dimensions running vertically. So we have this one here, the 0.5, again keeping that spacing consistent. And we also have a 0.4 here. Again, we're going to keep that in line with the 0.5. And again, we can't run a dimension from here to here. It's not going to fit. So we'll do as the sheet suggests, and we'll run a dimension from here to here and get the 1.25 dimension. Again, keeping a tighter distance between the first and the second dimension. And this is acceptable because we know what it is from here to here, 1.25, and then if we subtract these two numbers from 1.25, we'll know what the height is. So this is basically like leaving one out of a chain, which is acceptable. A chain of dimensions, I should say. And then next, we have the overall height. So that is from here to here. Maintaining distance. And now we have some options, right? So we have to be able to show the thickness of this extrusion and this one as well. And basically we have some options. You know, we could show it on the front view, or we could show it on the right side view or the top view. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to the right side view, because then I can avoid placing dimensions between views. I have to put this dimension between views because I'm not going to run an extension line all the way back to here, right? It makes more sense to keep the extension lines smaller in length. So I'll just keep it here on the front view, and that's going to be good enough. So we need to know this thickness, and that is here to here. This is going to be 0.4. Now, you see what's happened here? This extension line is perfect here. It leaves the gap, but it's covering here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this back up to this end point, just like that manually, snap it to here, and then you're going to get that gap as you should get it. So there's your 0.4. And we could also run that dimension for this extrusion right here, but also we could just, make this a typical, right? Save ourselves some work. Tip, meaning that this is typical, and that should be good enough. We shouldn't need to run that dimension again for the top extrusion, right? So it's because it's pretty clear that it's the same thickness if you look in other places. All right, now what we also need to do is create some more dimensions. I think I'm going to be actually creating some more detail views as well, right? So I'm not keeping dimensions on the part. So one thing that I can do is create a detail view here, place views, detail, and this will be detail B. And we'll put it down here. And this is going to tell the story of the angle, right? So this will be annotate, dimension from here to here, and we can run that 45 degrees here right off that view. Right, so perfect. Detail B, and we're also going to do a detail C for this 60-degree angle that needs to be done. So we're going to go to place views again, pick detail. We'll just click somewhere here to get it started. I haven't played around with this menu at all. I'm happy with the 2:1 scale. So I'm just going to click here. And there we go. Right? And then what we can do is go to annotate, and we'll dimension. And there's our 60-degree angle. And one thing I'll do while I'm down here is I'll just move these in alphabetical order, right? We might as well keep them ABC, right, instead of CBA. So that looks better. Detail A, detail B, detail C, and their scales. Right. Then we're not keeping these angular dimensions on the part. We're spacing things out a bit. Okay. So I'm just scanning this to see what else I have to do. We've got the 30-degree angle here. So we'll see what we can do with this. Again, we can pull that one off the part here, right? This is going to have to go between two views. I have no option to get it up on this side. So again, we can place dimensions between views when it's possible, meaning when we have an advantage to do so. In this case, like here, it makes sense to run this dimension on the inside of the top view. So we'll keep the 30 degrees like this. And we also need to show the length of this top extrusion, vertically and horizontally. Now the sheet shows those dimensions up here, but I'm going to show those dimensions where they're understood the best, which is in the profile. So that is here, and also here. Again, I realize that this places a dimension between two views, but again, they're not crowding, and I think that this is better understood. And you know what I'm going to do? I almost forgot. I need to move this up. Right? This needs to be, this is too close. I'm not being consistent like I should be. Right? We're trying to keep these dimensions a certain distance. So I'm just scanning this to make sure that it looks proper. Like I said, I don't expect it to be like exactly perfect, but when we look at it, it should look like that kind of care was taken, making sure that our spacing is consistent from first dimension, from the second and third and fourth dimension, from the first as well. Reminding you again that we're keeping these dimensions a little closer. And we're also going to need an overall length. We have an overall height, and we also are going to need an overall width, right? So we'll place that on the top view here, from here to here. That's going to give us 2.5, and we'll put our overall length on the bottom of the front view. We'll keep that in line with this one, keep our spacing consistent. And that should be it when I look at this. So remember, no matter what, even if it's not given, when you're completing an orthographic drawing for dimensioning, you always need to have the thickness, width, and length, the overalls listed somewhere, right? So we have that, the height on the right side view, we've got the width on the top and the length on the front view. They don't necessarily need to be all spread out over 3 views. You can get 2 of those on one view if you like, but in this case, it works out for us that we're able to place them and space them out all over the 3 views. Okay, so I'm going to call this part done. That is the detailing for the guide bracket. Good use and practice of what a detail view is and how to execute it. And the only thing I have to do with this, and like you've seen me do it many times before, is the drawing file title block completion, where you enter your name, so you fix your name. This is the guide bracket, company, Ancaster High School, revision number 0. So every time we need to make corrections to these things, we rev the number up. But this is the original, so this is going to be 0. This is the original release. So if you handed this in, it needs to be fixed. There's mistakes. I would show you the mistakes, and then I would also cross out the 0 and write a 1, because you'll change that to a 1 for the next time you submit it. So that's a little better explanation of what a revision number is. And our part number should be 3M1 dash, and this is the 6th drawing, because the centering bushing was our 5th, bevel washer was our 4th. Status, checked by, I'm putting my checker's name in, and apply and hit close. Okay, so how does this look? This looks the way it needs to be. We may just fix this so it's consistent in terms of spacing between views, and that should be it. All right, so that is it for the guide bracket. This is going to be your task over today or the next day or so. Good luck, and send me a message, flag me down if you need some assistance. Thank you.